let me tell you about my vision of my dream anime. What would be the anime that I would fund if I had all the money in the world to throw around and I could pick my own staff, make my own show. It's going to be a show called Omar, all caps with exclamation points. The show is basically what you would get if you fused K-On! And Shirobako together and had it take place over a much longer period of time. 4 seasons, each 13 episodes long. Character designs by Hajime Ueda. You may know his art because he's the guy who did the illustrations for all the ending themes of the Monogatari series. He also did the FLCL manga and a few other things that are probably no one's heard of. He's really cool, and I've always wanted a show with his art style. This is going to be a very out there, sort of experimental look to it. Gotta be handled by Studio Shaft and director Akiyuki Shinbo if we're going to go this route. It's just the way it's gotta be. They'll be willing to make 4 seasons. Animation, doesn't have to be amazing throughout this entire show. But I'm probably going to try to elevate Imamura Ryo to Chief Animation Director. He might have been doing something like that on the Kizumonogatari films. I haven't seen him yet. I know he hasn't been around much since the Kizumono started, so I just kind of assume that he animated the whole movie himself. I don't know, though. I haven't actually seen him yet. But he's the guy who did some of the most impressive cuts in Bakemonogatari and is one of my favorite animators. And he works for Studio Shaft, so he'd be perfect to have on as chief animation director for this show. Use a lot of his style for our more dramatic moments. But anyways, about the story of this. It's a show about a band that is formed in high school by a group of not all cute girls. There might actually be one guy in there, but mostly girls. 2 main girls are, of course, a couple, but that will be developed over the course of the series. The show starts when they form a band in high school because in their later years of high school, out of a mutual interest in experimental music. These are characters who have all been parts of other clubs up until this point, but for one reason or another haven't had any luck. The main girl has always been sporty. She was really into basketball before, but she's really short, and she hasn't gotten any taller since high school started, and she thinks it's time to give up on basketball. Her only other real hobby is music, but she's into really experimental stuff that nobody's heard of. So then she meets another girl who shares her deep love of the band the Mars Volta. And they name their own band Omar after Omar Rodriguez Lopez of the Mars Volta because they're such big fans of him. So they make a band called Omar. They recruit a drummer and, whatever else they need. I haven't thought through this that thoroughly, But the point is they start a band. At first it's mostly for fun, but then they start... As the first season will mostly be about them going through their last year of high school, graduating, and a little bit afterwards, where they're deciding what they're going to do with their future. So, sort of the typical time period of these high school girl club shows. And it's basically going to be about them starting this band, becoming friends, the 2 main girls sort of falling in love, and exploring their capabilities as a band. And then towards the end of the series, it's about them asking themselves, are we going to keep doing this now that high school is over? Are we going to take this band seriously? And of course, the first season sort of resolves with them deciding that yes, they will take the band seriously. Now, season 2. This is where they start taking the band seriously, and we're going to get a little bit more dramatic, whereas the first season would have been more sort of comfy, fun character interactions and stuff, with little hints of big, passionate, wanting to succeed, going on in the middle. This time, it's all about the passions and the path to success. The major conflicts in this season will be creative differences. It'll be band lineup changes, where one of the members, decides that maybe this isn't working out. And it'll be the struggle to actually get recognized when they start making music that they actually are proud of, but no one's listening to it, and they're not getting signed, and they don't know where to go from here, And so this is sort of the dragging them under. But as it goes along, they find a new member, they start getting... They at the very end of season 2 is when they'll finally have their big break, and they'll play their first big show at the end of season 2. Now, season 3 will be a little bit later on. At this point, the main characters are a successful band, and now they're worried about creative experimentation and expansion, and it's more about exploring what fame has brought into their lives, or not big scale fame, but being successful has brought to them. Exploring what it means to be a successful musician and to want to try new things and to continue expanding. This will probably get more into the personal side than the business side of, being in a band. It'll be more about exploring how their relationships are holding up and stuff like that after all this time. And then finally, season 4 will be even later down the line, when maybe they're starting to wane a bit creatively, when they have other avenues opening up to them. Some of the band members have probably had kids by now, and it's getting to that point where it's like a question of how long are we going to keep this going? How passionate are we? And in the end, maybe the band dissolves on good terms, and, the two main girls form a sort of other unit to do more experimental solo stuff that's not a part of the band that they've, been attached to, and they sort of go their own way, and the other characters, settle down and get into other things. And that's the course of my 50-episode story. Now, the full context here, full disclosure, I actually came up with the idea for this like 5 or 6 years ago, and I remember that the reason why I found this story while looking through notes, looking through all my old notebooks and stories that I'd written before. It wasn't nearly as expansive as I just detailed. In fact, I came up with all of that off the top of my head. Everything past the first season, I just made up. But those notes for that first season, I realized that the reason I wrote those is because at the time, I had just watched all of K-On! And I really liked the show, but what was holding me at arm's length was that I didn't like the music, because it just isn't my style. I'm not into J-pop and J-rock. I actually like the songs a lot more now, but back then I really just felt like, man, what if they made a show like this with my kind of music, where the characters are interested in like experimental rock and stuff, and they make like crazy noise music and shit. And so I came up with this idea for this story that would just be like K-On! Except with characters the characters' personalities would be more based in Hidamari Sketch, and the overall tone of the story would be more like something I would write, So that's sort of my ultimate anime. The soundtrack would probably be done by, it depends on who I could get. I would probably, if I'm just sticking to anime people, I would pick Tsuneo Imahori, the guy who did the soundtrack for Trigun and Hajime no Ippo Season 1, because he definitely has a lot of knowledge of experimental music and how to make it, especially the kind that I'd be going for this story. Maybe him and Yoko Kanno could team up and do this soundtrack, but I don't know about getting Yoko Kanno onto a show like this. It would be fascinating. But yeah, so that's kind of what it is. It's like a really edgy, bizarre, long-running version of one of these, high school girls do a club thing, except it goes on for way longer, way past high school, well into the characters' 30s, maybe even 40s. Just to give that full expansion of the character that I always want from these shows and I never get. So yeah, that's my dream anime.